So what is going on, guys? I am Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another zombies video where today I'm going to be explaining the full Chaos storyline. Now that season 1 of the Chaos story is over, Ancient Evil or DLC 2 was the last map we are going to get for possibly 6 or 7 months until season 2 begins. Some people have even speculated that season 2 is going to be within Treyarch's next game, so it could even continue in a few years. But what we do know is, for now, the Chaos story is finished. It will continue, but we have been left on a massive cliffhanger in Ancient Evil. So what better time than now to take a look at the entire Chaos storyline. As always, if you do go on to enjoy this, drop a like rating if you want to, make sure you are subscribed, but let's get into it. Here we go. Long ago, the first matter, called prima materia, was harnessed by an ancient civilization to create wondrous empires. Mining deep into the earth itself, these civilizations would return to the surface with as much prima materia as they could carry. No leader of mankind, such as emperors, kings, or priests, could resist the power of the prima materia, as with it, all of their societies and kingdoms would prosper. However, the more they used prima materia, the more greedy they would become. Benevolence would turn to violence, and peace turn to war. The power of the prima materia consumed them all, and the leaders soon neglected the citizens of their own societies. One by one, each of the leaders' reigns would come to an end, and their civilizations would fall. As time went on, however, more of humanity would succumb to the greed of the prima materia's power, but soon enough they had used so much that the substance had begun to run out. However, this was still not enough to temper humanity's desires. It was so powerful that it could create endless supplies of what people wanted, and this caused most to believe that actually it was too dangerous, as anyone who held it would have unending power. And so for this reason, 9 individuals of men of science, philosophy and reason brought together a group to form the 9. This group would go on to protect what remained of the prima materia and keep it safe, for mankind could not be trusted with this dangerous knowledge. As the further humanity progressed throughout time, the more boundaries of discovery were pushed, and man found new ways to end themselves. And when these discoveries were made, the 9 would arrive to secure them, preserving them outside of humanity's reach. Over the centuries, the collection of prima materia would grow, and its existence soon drifted into myth and legend, where it became an object of mankind's ultimate pursuit. The 9 would rotate their supply of prima materia and its knowledge between their ranks, allowing each to hold its power for a short amount of time. But due to their status as mortals and normal men, they would be persuaded that they were wrong from keeping what they knew private, and so they would soon decide to unveil their knowledge to the world, allowing their information to become public and to represent a beacon of humanity's intelligence and potential. However, this decision would be flawed. Revealing prima materia to the world again turned out to be a harbinger. Wars were fought and destruction reigned. People wanting to get their hands on this forced the 9 to once again make their information private. Despite this outcome, however, the 9 still had hope in humanity, believing that among the billions of lives on the face of the earth, that there were a few who could prove worthy to harness the knowledge and power of prima materia. And so in order to seek out these people, the 9 created various relics known as sentinel artifacts, which required a key to activate them. These artifacts, when activated with a key, would invoke trials to test the worthiness of individual humans. These trials would allow the individuals taking part to experience lengthy battles for worthiness, changing the environment around the trials and turning those not participating into the undead. However, once the trial is activated, those taking part are locked in either until completion or death. And when a trial is completed, the environment and the undead return back to normal, whilst also having no effect on time. And anyone who was to complete the trials provided by these sentinel artifacts would prove themselves worthy enough to access pieces of prima materia's knowledge that the 9 wield. This knowledge would come in the form of a vision of an item or location. Many years later, during the 19th century, a wealthy business adventurer called Alistair Rhodes bought a country estate in England after he learnt about druid ruins on the land and renamed it Rhodes Manor. At the end of the century, Alistair brought his young daughter Scarlett to a museum where he asked her to watch for anybody observing him whilst he was looking for an item. Unfortunately, policemen arrived and Alistair was arrested. Scarlett was separated from her father and grew up with relatives in care homes or amongst nuns, and she never got to see her father again for the next 15 years. In 1909, hundreds of dissident members of the Ancient Order created a new cult under under the leadership of the High Priest of Chaos. The goal of this new order is to force mankind to evolve by acquiring the Sentinel artifacts and accessing the knowledge of the Nine. Alistair, who had learnt about this new order and judging their intentions as evil, started his journey to access the knowledge of the Nine and empower humanity with it. And so he began. The following year in September 1910, Alistair travelled to Morocco to meet Bruno, a former enforcer of a criminal gang in the Paris underworld, who joined the French Foreign Legion after an assassination attempt resulted in the death of his child and a bounty being placed on Bruno's head from his former boss. Alistair explained to Bruno that his former associate stole an object he was looking for. This object was the Scepter of Ra, and he told him that neither them or their employees, who are the Order, could ever be allowed to get their hands on it. And so with this, Bruno agreed to assist Alistair. The two of them then travelled to Constantinople, where they ambushed a convoy and stole the scepter. With Bruno taking out half of the gang, the two of them then run and eventually arrive at a cave. Alistair reveals that he needed the scepter to reveal a hidden map pointing to Angkor Wat, but unfortunately for the two, the remaining members of the gang found them. However, Bruno, being the big guy that he is, managed to kill them. Meanwhile, Alistair was captured, and so Bruno, rushing in to save Alistair, took several bullets to the chest whilst managing to kill Alistair's capturer. Bruno, however, having been shot, did eventually die from his injuries, but because Alistair had the Scepter of Ra, he used it to revive Bruno, bringing him back to life, and from then on, Bruno swore to help Alistair wherever he needed him. Only one gang member managed to survive the encounter, and when he got out of the caves, the High Priest and several other cultists were waiting for him. And after learning that the Scepter of Ra had been stolen from the gang, the High Priest and the other cultists stabbed him to death. Several months later in March 1911, Alistair met with Stanton Shaw in the city of Siem Reap. Shaw was already a close friend of Alistair's, and he was a chemist who was so obsessed with his work that his wife left him and took their children with her. Alistair was trying to convince him to help him on his journey when German soldiers came in and captured Shaw. The German officer told Shaw that the gas they had used, based upon his formula, leaked through the containers, killing 147 men, although Shaw claimed it would be perfectly safe during transportation. And so, for this, Shaw was about to be executed by the German soldiers. However, thanks to Alistair, who promised to give the officers the greatest weapon the world had ever seen, with the help of Shaw, they agreed to free him. The group then travelled to Angkor Wat, where Shaw decoded symbols on a wall and learnt about the prima materia sealed behind it. The soldiers managed to enter the hidden room and found a small jar on an altar. Upon opening it, prima materia was released into the air and it then attacked the officers. For the rest of the soldiers, they were turned into zombies. Alistair and Shaw quickly fled the temple whilst being pursued by zombies, and whilst running, Shaw managed to create an explosive powerful enough to collapse the tunnel after them. The explosion, however, was so powerful that part of the temple almost killed them both. After the two managed to escape, Shaw asked Alistair what really happened back there, and Alistair confessed that actually he was never there for the prima materia and was actually glad that the explosion that Shaw let off would deny the Order of any information about it. Alistair then told Shaw that he'll need him again one day before leaving. He then walks away, but unbeknownst to Alistair, the High Priest is following him. Sometime after, Alistair found out that a Norse artifact that was located in the Natural History Museum in London was about to be moved to a private collection at the Harvard University in the United States. Alistair also discovered the key for an artifact in a magazine he read, featuring a Mexican spy named Diego Nicali with the key around his neck. And so he contacted him, and after learning that Diego was willing to meet him, Alistair's butler Godfrey made travel arrangements. Alistair and Diego met later on in a saloon in Ciudad Juarez. I probably pronounced that wrong, but it was during the time of the Mexican Revolution. Alistair told Diego he was looking for the greatest power mankind had ever seen and that he needed the medallion around his neck. Diego replied that it was a family heirloom and recounted that his mother told him it was part of something bigger that needed to be protected. He refused to give it to Alistair. That was before the two men were interrupted by the High Priest and members of the Order wearing wearing normal clothes instead of their ceremonial dress. And of course, they were also looking for the key. A fight broke out and Diego was knocked unconscious, whilst Alistair was captured by the Order. Alistair quickly managed to steal a revolver from one of the cultists before being saved by Diego, and the two men escaped using a carriage. After this, Diego finally agreed to give the key to Alistair, hoping to one day have it returned before telling him to leave the city for his safety. But although the Order couldn't get their hands on the key, they were able to find Scarlet. And so now, fearing for his life and believing that she is strong enough to overcome what is going to happen, Alistair wrote a letter to Scarlet where he explained his travels and the Order's intentions. He sent the letter with a package containing the key for the artifact, as well as tickets for the Titanic, and upon receiving it, Scarlet left, heading to Rhodes Manor. A little time after, in the evening of March 20th, 1912, Alistair invited dozens of his friends and family to Rhodes Manor. But before the guests arrived, Alistair's butler Godfrey fell under the influence of the Order. They captured him, killed him, they then revived him with the Scepter of Ra, meaning Godfrey was now under the cult's influence. And so, doing what they tell him, he then knocks out Alistair and locks him in the wine cellar. As the guests began to come, inside the manor, Godfrey, still under the influence of the Order, begins to draw glyphs on the ground before being approached by some of Alistair's guests, being the show cowboy, a fortune teller and a brigadier. At the same time, members of the Order then activate the Celtic artifact, which was in the possession of Alistair Rhodes, starting the trial and releasing the Prima Materia into the manor and turning all of the guests into zombies. Only Godfrey and the other three guests are saved from the Prima Materia because they were inside of the glyph drawn on the floor. The four survivors then went through Alistair's manor, completing the trial, where eventually they got to the boss battle, I guess you could call it, where they defeated the Shadow Werewolf, and then after defeating him, a vision of the Norse artifact appeared inside of Alistair's manor. Just as the show cowboy, the brigadier, and the fortune teller were going to inspect it to see what it was, Godfrey was taken control of by the cult, and he killed his three teammates, calling them unworthy before ordering the rest of the cultists to load Alistair into the car and leave. At this same time, Scarlet walks into the manor where she sees what Godfrey has done, and so she shoots him in the back. She asks him where her father is, and Godfrey says to her that she is too late. She cannot stop what is to come. And just then, a fire breaks out, and soon enough, Alistair's manor goes up in flames. Scarlet escapes, and just as she walks out of the front door, she sees the cultists driving off with her father. So Scarlet begins to pursue them, she jumps into a car, she chases them down, but unfortunately her car breaks down during the pursuit, crashes into the side of the road, and we see Alistair is then loaded into a plane, and the cult members take off with him. And after seeing this, Scarlet then takes a note out of her pocket from her father, telling her to track down Bruno, Shaw and Diego, as they will help her find him and stop the cult. And so that's exactly what Scarlet does. She contacts them, and on April the 10th, 1912, they all arrive in Southampton, where Scarlet explains to them what happened the night her father was taken, and what they'll have to do next, which is steal the Norse artifact. And so they all agree to help her, and the group embark on the Titanic. During the night of April 14th, 1912, the four start their plan to steal the Norse artifact. Diego charms one of the passengers, where he steals a key from her to get into the millionaire suite. Bruno and Shaw then knock out the guards. Scarlet enters the room, and using a device of her own invention, opens up the safe where the artifact is kept, but unfortunately, of course, it didn't go as planned. A cultist member was on the ship, bearing the red mark on his forehead. He steals the artifact from Scarlet. He also takes the medallion, and he activates the artifact. Just like in Dead of the Night, a protective circle is formed, so everyone inside of it is safe. However, everyone else on the ship is turned into a zombie. And then we see pretty much soon after, the Titanic is struck by the iceberg and it begins to sink. The crew then proceed to complete the Sentinel trial, where they defeat the final boss, which is a giant eye, and after the trial is completed, all of the passengers and crew turn back to normal. Everything is how it was before the trial is activated. The four characters then see a vision of an ancient doorway on the ship, but soon enough, the Titanic starts to sink again, and Scarlet, Bruno, Diego and Shaw take off on a lifeboat. And whilst they're awaiting rescue, Shaw recalls having seen that vision of that doorway before, but not in person, only in books. He tells Scarlet that that doorway is in Delphi. And then of course right at the end of the cutscene we get a shot of Bruno where it is revealed to us that actually he is a member of the cult. He has the red glowing symbol on his head. And if we take our minds back to when Alistair and Bruno went to retrieve the Scepter of Ra and Bruno ended up being killed and then Alistair revived Bruno, what we learn is that actually the reason the cult members wanted the scepter is because anyone who was revived with it comes under their control. They then become a member of the order. And so when Bruno died in the caves and Alistair used the scepter to revive him, unknowingly Bruno became a member of the cult. And it was finally revealed to us on Voyage of Despair. However, after all of this in the following days, the team then travel to Delphi in Greece and venture into a cave where they find the sealed door that they saw in the vision. However, the crew can't enter because there are secret codes and symbols that need to be inputted on it in order for it to open. Of course, the characters don't know this. They don't know how to open the door, but they then begin to hear a voice. This voice they hear is of the Oracle, and she invites them to breathe the vapors in the cave in order to find the knowledge that they are seeking. But she warned them that what they are looking for is not intended for mortal man. Upon breathing the vapors, the team are transported across millennia and wake up in an ancient Colosseum where they watch the High Priest activate the artifact. He does this in front of hundreds of cultists who are all spared from the prime materia. However, everyone else around, besides from Scarlet, Diego, Bruno and Shaw, are again turned into zombies. And the High Priest then forces the crew, who are slaves at this point, to complete the trial. And again, that's what the team do. They go through the map, completing the Easter eggs. They get to the final boss battle where they defeat the Guardian, the champions of the Nine, who are elephants named Fury and Wrath. And then once the trial is completed, a portal appears in front of them with the words Poseidon. This is the code that the characters needed in order to open the door to Delphi. The High Priest then goes to reach his hand into the portal, and when he does, he is attacked by the Prime Materia, only to be saved by the glyphs under his mask. Scarlet orders the High Priest to grant them clemency, as is dictated in the Nova Magnotum proclamation for completing the trial. It says that whoever completes it must be set free, but instead, the High Priest, not wanting these characters to live, orders them to be beheaded. The characters, after having this vision, then wake back up in the cave, and now knowing the code to the door, which is Poseidon, they open it. They walk through, where they arrive at an underground version of the city of Delphi. However, this time, the artifact has already been activated, and the zombies are already down here. The crew explore the city, where they eventually arrive at a temple in the middle, and they come face to face with the Oracle, the voice that they heard in the cave. They find that she is strapped to a chair, and the Oracle tells Scarlet that her father is here, however, he is trapped, and in order to free him, they first need to free her. And so that's exactly what the characters do. They go through the map, again, completing the trials, doing what is needed. Partway through completing the trial, Bruno is overtaken again by the cult, and they use him to stab Shaw. Bruno kills Shaw, and then he uses the Scepter of Ra to revive him, and so now both Bruno and Shaw are members of the cult. They are under their control. However, the other two, Diego and Scarlet, didn't see this happen, so they know nothing about it. But eventually the crew get to the final boss battle, in which they defeat a corrupted, zombified version of Perseus. He is the one who locked the Oracle in the chair. When the crew defeat Perseus, they get the key from him, they return back to the temple, and they set the Oracle free. The Oracle then opens up a secret chamber under the temple, telling Scarlet that her father Alistair is now free, but just before the crew go down there to look for him, the Oracle pretends that she is dying, and so Scarlet says that she will stay with her and sends off Bruno, Diego and Shaw to go underground looking for Alistair, and so that's exactly what they do. The three characters head beneath the temple looking for Alistair, while Scarlet stays above ground helping the Oracle, and whilst they are down there, they do find Alistair, but he is not in the state they expected. He's actually turned to stone, and alongside him are his kidnappers, the cultists, who are also turned into stone. At this point, Diego realizes that actually something's wrong, and so he runs upstairs to warn Scarlet, but before he can get there, it's too late. The Oracle says to Scarlet, even though you do not yet know what you are, there is still so much that you can teach me. And at this point, she looks into Scarlet's eyes, goes in to kiss her, and we see something happen. It's not really too clear, but it seems like the Oracle takes some kind of knowledge from Scarlet. Clearly Scarlet knew something, and the Oracle takes that from her. Scarlet then collapses on the floor, and the Oracle reveals her true self. She takes off her hood, where actually she is Medusa. At this point, Diego arrives upstairs, where he hides, because of course if he looks into Medusa's eyes, he will turn into stone. Meanwhile, back down in the cave, Bruno and Shaw are overtaken by the cult. They have the glowing symbol on their head, and they just stare aimlessly at the statues. And back upstairs, whilst Diego is still hiding, Medusa says she will open the library. The world will be hers. She then walks away, and that is where the Chaos story ends. And so that is it. That is the whole Chaos storyline. As you see, we've been left on a massive cliffhanger. What's going to happen to Bruno and Shaw? Is Scarlet's father ever going to return? Clearly there's more to Scarlet than we know. What library is Medusa going to? There are a ton of questions, but that so far is the full Chaos storyline. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, this took ages. Make sure to drop a like rating. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, goodbye.